It is my extreme honour to present the results of E3805. E stands for the Eastern Cooperative Oncology Group. And this study again follows through with the vein that it is an NCI-supported study. This study was also done in collaboration with our colleagues, Southwest Oncology Group. The patient population for this study, to put things into context, are men whose cancer has moved from the prostate gland to their bones, and less commonly, liver or lung. So it's different to the question of who should and shouldn't get treated for prostate cancer. These are men who do have significant prostate cancer that is metastatic disease. To put the disease into context and the advances in this setting, and to follow again from the breast analysis of the conversation about Dr. Bateson and the work that was done in the 1890s, for prostate cancer, we've known since the 1940s that testosterone suppression is a very active therapy for prostate cancer. And the standard of care for the last 70 years has been androgen suppression, testosterone suppression alone. We use the term hormonal therapy, androgen deprivation therapy, but for context and just for today, I'll use the word testosterone suppression, which is the backbone for this. Many of you have been reporting over the years the advances that we've been making in disease that has grown with a suppressed testosterone, a disease state often referred to as castration-resistant prostate cancer. And that's on the far right of this curve. Sorry, excuse me. Going back. The far right here. This is disease that is progressing when the testosterone is suppressed. And you've heard about agents such as abiraterone, enzalutamide, alpha-radin, cipulysyl T, docetaxil, and cabazitaxel. Docetaxil was the first agent to be approved for this disease setting because it improved overall survival. That happened in the early 2000s, 10 years ago. 10 years ago today, there were 2 plenary sessions showing docetaxil worked in that disease space. We, in the medical oncology and neurological oncology world, said, well, if it works in the later stage, will it work in the early stage? Hence, this study design, simply testosterone suppression alone versus testosterone suppression plus 6 cycles of chemotherapy and stop, and then follow everyone on testosterone suppression alone. We used stratification factors to ensure the groups were equally balanced. And what I should say is that this study was done as a collaboration with the National Cancer Institute, as stated, but we also do work closely with our industry colleagues, and Sanofi did provide drug for early use, which was off indication. This study was, the 05 in E3805 points to the fact that the study was designed in 2005. The ability for industry to support a study that takes 10 years to report out, 9 years in this case, is difficult because they've got different competing agenda. And again, to follow up on the conversation about the role of the NCI, this is a study that needed to be done, and it takes a long time. In this case, 9 years. And here we are. 790 men were accrued from July 2006 to November 2012. A planned interim analysis at 53% information in October 2013 met the pre-specified criteria for significance and release of the data. And in discussion with ASCO and discussion with the NIH, we did a press release at this time for public health need because there was a significant advance. But the data has been refined and is now presented here. And what I would say is that the abstract has been slightly updated with the data here as some of the elements in the database were completed. And we now have a testosterone suppression alone, a median survival of 44 months, whereas the combination 57.6 months. The hazard ratio is a way that we measure the chance a person is going to be alive at any time point, and it is 0.61, which means a man has a 39% chance of more likely of being alive at each of the time points throughout this study, compared with just being on the testosterone suppression alone. There were 136 deaths in the testosterone suppression alone arm versus 101 deaths in the docetaxel plus testosterone suppression, with a median follow-up of 29 months. When we looked at the data more closely, we could see most of the benefit seems to track in those who had a high volume of disease. For this study, this was defined as men who we recognize tend to have a poorer outcome, a higher burden of bony metastases, 4 or more in this case, or the presence of liver or lung metastases. And as one can see, in patients with high-volume metastatic disease, testosterone suppression plus early docetaxel improves the median survival by 17 months, namely an increase from 32.2 months to 49.2 months. When we looked at other variables to see if this, to document the clinical benefit, we saw the number of patients who had a significant and major suppression of their PSA was doubled, both at the 6-month mark and the 12-month mark, 22% with the combination versus 11%. Other evidence of the benefit that we're controlling the cancer and controlling it for a longer time is that measuring the time to progression, whether it was by a rise in their PSA, new symptoms, or worsening scans, was 20.7 versus 14.7. The median time to the harder endpoint of clinical progression, namely worsening disease on scans or symptoms, was 32 versus 19.8 months. We also measured the number of patients who progressed and how many got chemotherapy at the time of progression. Let's focus on the ADT, the testosterone suppression alone group. 174 patients had some evidence of progression at the time that we did the analysis in January 2014, and 129 actually got docetaxel. So that is 3/4 of the patients actually got the subsequent therapy that was used up front in the combination. Very importantly, when we're using a cytotoxic which does have a side effect profile, we need to qualify and quantify the toxicities. Fever with a lowered white cell count is something that we are troubled by with cytotoxics because we do suppress the immune system, and 6% of patients did have what we term neutropenic fever. There was a significant impact on the nerve function, 1% to either on the feelings in the fingers or the toes, 1% sensory, and 1% motor. 1 of 397 patients who received early docetaxel died due to treatment. So the clinical interpretation of this data is upfront chemohormonal therapy prolongs overall survival in men with metastatic prostate cancer commencing testosterone suppression. This is relevant for men who are suitable for docetaxel therapy, a term we sometimes use, chemo-fit. Some patients are too frail for chemotherapy. The certainty of the data is strong for patients with high volume of metastatic disease and clearly justifies the treatment burden. This is one of the biggest improvements in survival we have seen in a trial involving patients with an adult metastatic solid tumor. Longer follow-up is required to get more certainty on the benefit for patients with low-volume metastatic disease.